solar finance. Thanks very much. We're going to get started in just about a minute or so. Hi, it's Michelle Savage with XBRL US, and you are here for our webinar, Standards for More Efficiency in Solar Finance. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we're very happy to have some great speakers. You can see the list on your screen here. Our first speaker is going to be Daniel Boff. Daniel is an analyst at the Sunshot Initiative at the Department of Energy. We're then going to have a talk by Jonathan Previtali. John is Vice President in the Environmental Finance Group at Wells Fargo. And John is going to walk us through a little bit of the issues in project finance today in the solar world that we're hoping to resolve with standards. We're then going to have a demonstration and a discussion about standards from Mark Goodhand. Mark is Head of Research at Core Filing, and also Chris Mills, Head of Support at Core Filing, and Campbell Pride, who's President and CEO of XBRL US. And also, actually, even before we get to the demonstration, we're going to have a talk from Tom Tanzi, who's the Chairman of the SunSpec Alliance, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Orange Button program and how it's working to use in solar financing today. So just a quick walk through the agenda. First, we'll have Dan from the Department of Energy on the Sunshot Initiative and Orange Button. Then Tom is going to talk about the Orange Button program in more detail. We'll talk about pain points in solar financing with Wells Fargo. And then we'll talk a little bit about XBRL in particular for solar standards, demonstration of the taxonomy, and then talk briefly about next steps. So with that, I'm going to bring up some slides from Dan Boff, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Department of Energy's programs related to solar financing. So bear with me a second while I pull up these slides. Okay, Dan.
Great, thanks, Michelle. So a little bit of background for the folks on the line. The Sunshot program is the funder of Orange Button. And really, Sunshot was designed as a cross-cutting government program that was designed to effectively lower the installed cost of solar energy to that of the market rate of electricity in the United States. If we see here on the next slide, we'll see that, you know, historically when solar has been sort of a very expensive application, there it is, a very expensive application for electricity. You know, in the 70s was really only feasible for space applications. And when we launched the program in the year 2011, we decided that we wanted to sort of finance things and provide grants for things that could ultimately reduce the cost by 75% by the year 2020. So in the next slide, we'll see we've actually revised these goals recently. I don't know if folks have been following some of the trade press, but essentially there's been a lot of analysts saying that really within the past few months, utility scale solar has become market competitive, hitting that sort of 6 cent per kilowatt hour metric just in the past year. So we've issued some more aggressive metrics going out to the year 2030. And cornerstone to this is a cost goal of 3 cents per kilowatt hour for utility scale solar, essentially allowing a buffer for things like energy storage or demand response to help make solar not only one of the most inexpensive energy sources in the US, but one that could be reasonably and easily paired with flexibility or energy storage applications. So if we go to the next slide, this really illustrates how the department organizes around this goals and the different strategies that it takes to accomplish the cost reduction goal. So we have two programs that are really focused on research and development, primarily around photovoltaic technologies and concentrating solar technologies. But we also have three cross-cutting teams. The first, systems integration, which deals with novel ways to integrate solar into the electricity grid. The next, tech to market, which really deals with creating a robust marketplace for solar technologies and and working with solar businesses. And the last category is soft costs, which is really where the orange button work falls into the portfolio. So on the next slide, we'll see sort of an illustration of soft costs. If you ask most folks in the solar industry what a soft cost is, they'll likely say it's something like financing, it's O&M cost, it's labor cost, it's permitting or interconnection costs, and all that's true, but we really think of soft costs as costs that are really born out of information asymmetry. Someone somewhere doesn't have the right information to make their decision, and the result of that is that there's an economic inefficiency that's either passed along to the consumer or results in market opportunity. And we think, going back to when we launched this opportunity, that data scarcity, that data interoperability is one of sort of the biggest information asymmetries that we see in the solar industry right now. So on the next slide, we'll see that these transaction costs really result in either greater information search, gathering and generation costs, and they result in inefficiency or inactions when decisions appear risky. And this is something that we've certainly seen in the finance industry with regards to solar. On the other hand, it can result in things like compliance and enforcement costs, just because people aren't sure what's happening in the marketplace. And we've seen over the past couple of years, as the solar market's gotten more and more robust, access to information, especially high quality data, has really slowed market growth and has prevented market access for some folks. So on the next slide, we'll see that the soft cost program really has identified 4 strategic areas where we try to get programs out there. The first being data and analysis, finding technical solutions. The second, networking and technical assistance, putting those technical solutions in the hands of implementers. Training, getting a workforce in the solar industry that's able to meet the demand and is familiar sort of with the leading edge of innovation in the industry. And then finally, business innovation, helping put new materials, new data sets into the hands of business leaders so they can create new business models or adapt their existing business models to market condition. Which brings me to my final slide, which is the Orange Button program. Orange Button takes a lot of these components. There are networking aspects of it. There's certainly data and analysis aspects of this program. We're hoping to seed business innovation, and we want to help train people to use new data standards, which is partially the reason why we're here today, ultimately with the goal of simplifying and standardizing solar data so it can really be easily used by anyone who needs it.
Thanks very much, Dan. Okay, I think we're going to move on to Tom. Hang on one second. Okay, so I'm turning over to Tom Tanzi.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to all of our audience members today for tuning in to learn more about the Orange Button program. We're really super excited about this program to develop solar data interchange standards for the solar industry. So a little bit more about the Orange Button program. This is a public-private partnership, and it enjoys a total funding of about $8 million. So that was $4 million by the federal government, and then another $4 million that's contributed by industry participants, including many of the people that are on this call here today. And in terms of the leadership associated with Orange Button, there actually were 4 prime contracts associated with it, and Solar Energy Power Association, which had subsequently subsumed the SGAP, were in charge of doing market outreach and market requirements gathering. The SunSpec Alliance, which is a domain expert in solar data interchange standards, we're responsible for the taxonomy and the APIs, and also verifying the use cases and so forth, and engaging with industries. We have Kilowatt, KWH Financial, that's providing the first live application and implementation over the Orange Button standards, and then the National Renewable Energy Lab that's working with this on information dissemination and reaching out to consumers, and also providing some examples through their website about how to actually use the Orange Button standards. So there are currently literally hundreds of companies involved in various aspects of either defining the standards, evaluating them, or implementing them, which I'll get to in the moment. So next, please. All right, so why standards? What's the big deal about standards? For any business to get to scale, standards are required. For any business to maintain that scale, standards are required. And so this imagery gives you a really good idea about what it means to become a mainstream part of the economy. And we don't even think about these things, about how the standardization of railroad tracks led to the development of the transportation system across this country and many others, barcoding systems or the shipping container system. So these are all standards that were built with the express purpose of optimizing the free flow of goods, minimizing wastage, and allowing innovation to occur. So many other industries, of course, have propped up along the backs of these industries that are sort of illustrated here. This is the exact same concept we hope to are applying in the solar financing space. And that's shown on the next slide here. Yeah, so standards for solar finance. So what's the point? Is to lower costs, to increase accuracy, and make data more timely. So what's the issue? The issue is that the data associated with the solar financing transaction, not only is it dispersed among many disparate sources, but it's inconsistently represented. Some is in paper, some is in PDFs, some is in various other applications. So our intention here is to provide an interchange standard to get all the data into an interchangeable standard format, so that it can be consumed by applications, providing the transparency and the liquidity of the data to the financing institutions. So that's the overall objective, and now we'll get into how we're achieving that. All right, so when you think about Orange Button, you should think about one thing: data interchange standards for solar finance, pure and simple. Now, we address many other parts of the life cycle, but really this is the main event here, is to support data interchange for solar. The next, please. So what does this mean to support data interchange standards for solar? So here we're giving an example of the solar life cycle. And one could argue that there are other substages, but in broad strokes, when we look at the solar life cycle, we think about the feasibility phase. So would it be profitable if we were to put a solar system on someone's house, in this field, or on a commercial building? So once the feasibility is, of course, teased out, then you need to do your initial financing so you can develop your deal. Once you pass through those hurdles, then there's the design and construction phase, and followed by operations. And so in each one of these phases, we're collecting data at the original source, and then hopefully we're passing it on. So let's make one click, please. And so this kind of takes a blow-up view when we look inside of the financing bucket, because there are various types of financing that you go through it in the life cycle: portfolio management, securitization and takeout, insurance. You can read the rest. And rest assured that each one of these purple boxes you see on the screen has an equal number of steps and an equal amount of complexity. So in order to avoid stranding data, and in order to optimize reuse, in comes Orange Button. So one more click. So we add Orange Button to the mix here. We're now able to capture data in the feasibility phase, feed it all through the different types of financing phases, and on down the life cycle. And what this does is it makes data more timely, reduces complexity, increases transparency, and ultimately decreases financing costs. Okay, next, please. All right. So as I promised you, that each one of those little boxes that I showed has an equal amount of complexity, and certainly that is the case. So we did a blow up view of the finance aspect here. But if you were looked inside to the design and feasibility and so forth, you'd see a lot of other discrete steps that need to take place as well. And so our scope and remit when we put together the Orange Button working groups to define the standards was to go through each one of these use cases, define who the actors are, what the software is, what the data sources are, and so forth, and outline our market requirements from that standpoint. SunSpec's role and XBRL's role as working in partnership with us then is to create a standardized data taxonomy. So this is a dictionary of defined terms that are required to facilitate these applications. Those dictionary of terms that are then organized into information models such that they can be used in software applications. And then we combine that with an application programming interface, a web services interface, and then of course a compliance test suite. So the point is that with a standard taxonomy, standard API, and the compliance test suite, we put ourselves into positions for software developers that support various aspects of the life cycle to build the interface, the Orange Button interface, into their product. It can then be tested for compliance, which then gives the promise to the end user that if you buy Orange Button compatible products, they are going to work one with the other. Next, please. So what do you get for all this hard work? And trust us, it's hard work. Well, there's benefits that accrue throughout the entire life cycle, and you can read them here. But from the financing standpoint, the risks are abundant, and so shining the light on those risks and demystifying them, that's the principal benefit here. For the asset managers, the timeliness of the reporting, right? Time is money, and the solar service contracts are aligned on monthly boundaries, and you have to close the books every month, and you can only do that if you're getting timely, accurate data, including from your credit rating agencies and your lenders and so forth. From an O&M perspective, keeping the system running at peak performance, diagnosing issues quickly. If you're a utility or grid operator, knowing that you have a system in operation, seamlessly dispatching these assets are the benefits that you're looking for that Orange Button delivers. And I could go on with more, but everybody here is going to get the slides. So there's these benefits and more that come out of this very important initiative. So finally, you put Orange Button into play. Now you have a very complex supply chain with lots of different players now using a common set of data interchange standards. What that does is that unlocks the flow of capital. So a big challenge is how do we get investors off the sidelines, and how do we get them comfortable with investing in the solar as an asset class? Well, the answer is to provide transparency and to provide data, and that's precisely what Orange Button does. And so with that, I'll turn it off over to my colleague. I think next up is John Previtali of Wells Fargo Bank, and they'll describe how John will describe how his bank and how the industry sees Orange Button from the banking perspective.
Thanks very much, Tom. John, you want to go ahead?
Vice President in the Renewable Energy and Environmental Finance group at Wells Fargo. And I'm actually in charge of technical due diligence. So I'm an engineer by training. Next slide, please. So Wells Fargo, just a brief description of our business. We have been financing renewable energy projects, mostly wind and solar, but also some other renewable energy projects for about 10 years. And we've amassed a portfolio of over 8 gigawatts of wind projects and solar power projects. You can see them here across the United States. Most of the projects, as you would expect, are solar distributed generation projects, so rooftops and carports. We have over 300 of those, but we also have quite a number of utility scale solar power projects as well. Next slide, please. So as my colleague Dan Boff mentioned from the DOE, the soft costs are indeed a good portion of the costs of solar, and also a good portion of the work that we do here at the bank when we're financing solar power projects. This is another version of the graphic that Dan showed, confirming that soft costs are an issue. And as Dan mentioned and Tom reiterated, a good portion of the soft costs is associated with data retrieval, transfer, hunting and pecking of data, re-entry, error correction, and aggregation of data into reports. So next slide, please. And just to further emphasize that issue, here is a relatively high-level flowchart of the project finance information flow process that we use for what we call origination. Origination is the first step of our process here after we identify a project that we'd like to finance. We do a tremendous amount of due diligence on the project before we make the investment in the project. And I should step back a moment and say that for those of you who are not familiar with project finance can be thought of as essentially investing in a project or buying either the entire project or a portion of the project. And that also applies to portfolios of projects. So, just like you would when you were buying a house, you would want to, look at the house, make sure that the house is in good condition, have it appraised and things like that. We do the same thing, but at obviously kind of like an industrial scale for utility scale solar power projects and portfolios of rooftop and carport projects. And each one of these boxes here represents a different organization that contributes to that effort. Starting from the left, we have firms like the engineering, procurement, and construction contractor, and the PPA off-taker, and so forth. All these companies contribute data to the project developer, who's actually responsible for building and operating the project generally. The project developer is our client, and they put all that data in the form of documents into a data room. And then following the diagram over to the right, you can see we have a tremendous number of consultants who then consume that data, analyze it, and turn it into non-biased third-party reports that we then take into the bank as part of our due diligence process. We also access a tremendous amount of data from the data room directly. And then in that box, the brown box to the right, what we do is we combine all that data for the project with internal data from the bank, credit ratings for various stakeholders in the project, like the PPA off-taker, for instance, and the operator, current exposure levels, so how much money we've already deployed to these companies in the forms of loans or investments. Also, we generate our own pricing models to figure out how much we should be paying for the project based on our yield requirements and the project's profitability. And we combine all that information into what's called an origination request, which is essentially a business case that, an initial business case that we use to bid on a project. If we win the bid, then we turn that information plus a lot more due diligence that's done over the course of the construction of the project into an investment memo. That's our final business case that we use to actually request and receive funding to invest in the project. After the project is funded, we hand off the project along with a lot of information to our portfolio management team. On the origination side of our business, we have about 15 people doing this sort of work. And on the portfolio management team, we have an equal number who are actually responsible for overseeing the ongoing performance of the projects, both from a economic perspective and also an energy perspective. Incidentally, there's a small box down on the lower right-hand corner, something that is I believe, relatively unique to Wells Fargo, but I think it is a growing interest in other banks, is we also institute a parallel monitoring system that monitors the performance of the project in addition to the primary monitoring system used by the operator. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a diagram of how the data flows. As I mentioned, documents are sent to a data room, pulled down by consultants, and then we consume them. And this is a very labor-intensive process because the documents are in a lot of different formats, PDF, Word documents, Excel documents, everything you can think of. And there's not a lot of organization. So this is just a tremendous amount of work. Next slide, please. So what I'm hoping we can do with the orange button is to streamline this process significantly using the XBRL example that has been so successful with the Securities and Exchange Commission and Edgar. So in that case, what's happening is that the data is actually embedded into documents that can be read by machines and by people. And the documents go to a database, they're pulled down as necessary, and then basically stored in this database that I would like our staff to access in order to get information in a standard format, in an aggregated format, and very quickly. And so in that case, we would be able to increase the volume of our transactions and obviously the speed of the transactions. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this slide, it gives you a glimpse into what's going on in the portfolio management process. Again, each box represents, the boxes on the left represent different entities that provide data to the portfolio management team. As I mentioned, our portfolio management team is made up of approximately 15 people, and they're responsible for monitoring the ongoing performance of the projects. And specifically, they produce quarterly reports, which we call tear sheets, and also annual reviews of each group of projects that we call funds. And this process is extremely labor intensive as well. There's a lot of data retrieval that comes from, again, different formats. And maybe I can show you more in the next slide. Could you go to the next slide, Michelle? Yeah, so we have asset managers who work for us getting data directly from databases, both within the bank and also from other banks that may hold the bank accounts for each project. On an average, each project has approximately 4 bank accounts. So we're talking about over 1,000 bank accounts that we have to access and get data from on a quarterly basis. We also get documents from data rooms, and also documents sent to us directly from the project's asset manager, who is responsible for operating the project. So all that data is put together on a quarterly basis and turned into reports, and it's a tremendous amount of work. And could I go to the next slide, please? So again, I'm very interested in using the orange button to streamline this process and automate it in such a way that the reports are actually pretty much automatically generated and sent to our asset management team. And then they can review it and pass it along. So one thing I'll mention just really quickly while I'm on this slide is that we hire the best and the brightest folks to work for us, and we have a tremendous advantage because of that. But it's the problems associated with data retrieval and data entry are actually causing staffing problems for us. And over the last 2 years, we've had approximately a 50% turnover in our portfolio management staff among asset managers and analysts who often come with incredible expertise and a skill set, but you know, are not interested in handling, you know, all the data entry and whatnot that we ask of them. You know, we have to have these people on staff because, you know, in addition to creating these reports and whatnot, they're also making very important decisions for the projects, decisions about, you know, how to handle operational issues and staffing issues and issues associated with bankruptcy, and also, you know, selling assets when, if that makes sense, they handle all that stuff. So yeah, it's a bottleneck for us. We have, you know, continued to be successful by focusing on utility scale projects that have, you know, less data entry requirements, like basically per project or per megawatt, than the distributed generation projects. But, you know, it would be great if we could, you know, solve this problem in order to scale our business to handle a larger volume of both utility scale and distributed generation projects. Also, you know, what Dan was mentioning, I think it was Dan that was mentioning before, was that a lot of times, you know, the lack of data and the lack of accurate monitoring of these projects actually has a kind of like a binary effect on project finance. A lot of people think that, you know, if we do this, we'll be able to lower our costs for project finance. And I'm optimistic about that. But, you know, I think a larger point is that if we don't have the ability to process this data in a timely manner, in a streamlined manner, and also an accurate manner, you know, we will turn away a lot of projects that we would have otherwise done. So yeah, there is a binary effect. Next slide, please. Here are a couple other things that we could do. So in this case, this is an example of how we could use the orange button data to streamline the sales of projects from one bank to another. So in this case, you have a series of 5 projects that are all sending data to a database that we're then consuming. It's kind of like a simplified version of the portfolio management slide. Next slide. And then, you know, if we want to sell those projects, if we had the ability to basically create these data streams, we could just essentially point these data streams to the other bank's database, and you know, they could start monitoring the projects. And you know, I didn't put it in here, but we would also obviously hand over, you know, all the data that we had previously aggregated for the projects to the new bank who bought the projects for us. So in this way, this would really streamline asset sales and acquisitions, which would be great for us because then we could free up more capital to finance more new projects through the origination process, which is actually what we're you know, really, really good at compared to other banks. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is something that I just wanted to mention that is a best practice that could actually be adopted right now, and that I'm actually asking, you know, our project development sponsors and subcontractors and whatnot to adopt as they can. And it's the idea of using like documents or basically document templates for projects. So we have consistency across the documents for each project, and thus can more easily review them. And the way that this can be done is by having essentially a document template that, as I mentioned, remains the same for each project, but then have a reference sheet or even a reference page that contains the a number of defined terms and specific values for each project. So in this way, we don't have to go through, you know, hundreds or thousands of pages and pick out individual defined terms and reference values for each project like we do now. we could just look at the first page or a couple pages or like a reference document to inspect the defined terms and the specific values for each project. So that would streamline our due diligence process significantly. And this is already done in a large degree for wind by GE, which is one of the largest providers of wind turbines in the United States. So I'm kind of taking a cue from them. All right, Michelle, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Jonathan, thanks very much. I really appreciate your insights into the pain points that solar installation experts have to deal with. I also want to mention that we will be taking questions, and so if you do have questions, we did get a question about whether or not the event will be recorded, and yes, it will. We are recording this right now, and it will be posted on our website. So you can come back and take a look at it again later on, or forward it on to colleagues. If you have questions, just click on the Q&A link at the top of your screen, and then you can submit questions that way. So now we're going to turn to the next part of our presentation. I'm going to switch slides one last time here. And bear with me one second. Okay. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mark Goodhand from Core Filing, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about the XBRL standard and why it was chosen as the tool as the standard to accommodate these solar financing standards. Mark?
Great, thanks, Michelle. Next slide, please. So XBRL offers many benefits, but today I'm going to focus on three. First is its uniform dimensional structure, which is understood by a range of open source and commercial software. Second, its rich type system, which helps to ensure the integrity of your data. And finally, its extensible nature, the fact that you can reuse and extend taxonomies. So if US GAAP already has a definition for assets, we don't need to create a new one for Orange Button. Next slide, please. First thing to know is that there's no substitute for structured data. Traditionally, we may have achieved structure by rekeying from paper or PDF into spreadsheets or databases. These days, machine learning can help with that process, but however you get it, once you've got structure, you don't want to lose it. So we need a standard machine-readable format for exchanging the data. There are a range of base formats that you can choose from. XML, JSON, and CSV are the most popular. But to do anything useful with the data, you need to understand how it's arranged. So here we see an example of an XML document that's used for corporation tax here in the UK. To work with it, you need to understand the hierarchy. You need to know that the currency appears 3 levels deep in the default currency element, and that the reporting period appears next to it in the period end element. Next slide, we'll compare that with a US SF133, this Treasury XML document. Here you see right at the top there that the date is partly captured by the FY attribute, that says 2017, on the root element, but you have to combine that information with what you see lower down in the month elements, where you have those 3-letter English abbreviations for the month names. Here, presumably the currency is US dollars, although that's not explicit anywhere in this report. And because of these differences, software that's written to consume CT600s can't understand SF133s and vice versa. And on the next slide, we'll see how XBRL is different. XBRL has a uniform structure with standard fields for the dimensions that come up again and again. So in the top left, you see the legal entity, and now with legal entity identifiers, we have a good structure for capturing those consistently. Typically, you'll also have a reporting period, sometimes a start, end, and end, sometimes just an instant. Below that, we have revenue, the sort of main reporting concept that we're capturing here. And for every numeric value in XBRL, you have units. Here, it is currency, it's US dollars, but it's not restricted to currencies. It can capture any unit of measure, SI units, imperial units, whatever you like. And finally, at the bottom there, you see one of the extensible features of XBRL. This is a custom dimension business segment that's been defined in the taxonomy. So see that in context. Let's go to the next slide. Here you have a typical financial statement. You have line items and periods. If we click once, we'll see that when this is tagged up in XBRL, every number on this sheet is qualified by those dimensions we saw earlier. Okay, the next slide is one for the geeks. If you're interested in the technical details, this is what XBRL looks like in its JSON form. You can see all those dimensions here represented, the built-in ones prefixed with XBRL, and custom prefixing for the taxonomy defined dimensions. Next slide. So XBRL started life as an XML dialect, but it now has those JSON and also CSV forms. They all share the same dimensional model. And we've seen in the many years that XBRL has been running, standard tools apply to a wide range of domains, from traditional company accounts through credit risk to carbon disclosure and now to solar. Next slide, please. Hopefully this is uncontroversial. Data quality is important. You want to know that your numbers are really numbers, that your dates are really dates. Taxonomies let you enforce the type for each reporting concept, and they also let you constrain the allowed values for each dimension. The final slide, nearly final. Perhaps the most important feature of XBRL for Orange Button is the fact that XBRL taxonomies can be reused and extended. The number of concepts and dimensions can grow over time, and you can simply drop in a new version of the taxonomy and find that the software continues to work without modification. What does that look like for Orange Button? Over the years, many, many years, there's been a significant investment in the US GAAP taxonomy. It's got 15,000 data fields. We're going to extend that with some more fields, click through, that are specific to the solar industry. And thereby we eliminate reinvention of wheels and unnecessary work. And it opens up possibilities for comparability between, say, SEC filings and similar fields that you find in the solar data. So I think that's a good point to hand over. You can actually see some of this in action.
Great, thanks very much, Mark. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Mills, who's going to walk us through how to actually see the taxonomy.
Lovely, thank you very much, Michelle. Yeah, so we've come across this taxonomy over the course of these slides. I'm sorry, Michelle, can you put the slides back up, please?
Sorry, I was just okay. I thought I was going to go ahead and share my screen, but or let you share your screen, but go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I'm very excited to show you the taxonomy in Yeti. But before I do that, I just wanted to what Yeti is. So a couple of slides to jump through, and then we'll go into Yeti itself. So if you go through to the next slide, please. Just the one after this. Thank you. Okay, so Yeti enables you to review taxonomies without having to look at the underlying XBRL. It enables reviewers to provide feedback as part of an ongoing taxonomy development process and affords you tight control over your taxonomy development process. And all you really need to access taxonomies, the Orange Button taxonomy within Yeti, is an internet browser. So next slide, please. So there are various Yeti environments available. Those of you familiar with the US GAAP taxonomy may find the Yeti interface very familiar. There are two linked within the slide deck. The top one, Bigfoot, provides access to over 100 global taxonomies. So that's useful if you want to see how other taxonomies look. But the one we're interested in today, and the one where the solar taxonomy is the bottom link. So at this point, I'd like to jump over to Yeti and give you a feel for what that looks like and how the taxonomy looks in there. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, Michelle, can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, I can see it.
Thank you. Thank you. So I believe there will be a public review period towards the end of July. At that point, the solar taxonomy will be publicly available without the need to log in, but you'll need to log in to be able to apply comments. Until such time as the taxonomy is set up that way, I need to log in to be able to access it. It's not currently publicly available, so I'm just going to log in now. So I log in with my credentials. So the first thing I'm taken to is the list of taxonomies that I have access to, of which there is only one at the moment, the solar taxonomy. So this information here gives me a little bit of information about what it is that I'm opening. It's known as an entry point in XBRL terms. So if I click that and press open, the taxonomy will open instantly within Yeti. So the first thing you'll notice is that Yeti is split into 3 main sections. We call them panels, one in the top left here, one towards the top right, and one towards the bottom. We'll go through each of those in turn, but essentially the top left is a high-level overview of the taxonomy. Top right gives you a little bit more information, allows you to drill down into various sections of the taxonomy, and the bottom provides some additional tools. So starting with the top left, this here network browser, it displays the taxonomy and all of the concepts within according to the presentation defined by the taxonomy. So if I use the little plus icons here, I can drill down into this first group, terms, listing of all terms, and I can see under solar taxonomy, I've got 3 sections and so on and so forth, and I can keep drilling down until I see this paper icon. The paper icon means that this particular taxonomy concept is a reportable concept. So XBRL documents prepared against this taxonomy will be could contain this concept as a reported item. Now, before I jump over to any more of Yeti interface, I would like to hand over to Campbell, who's going to give us a very brief overview of the actual structure of the orange button taxonomy as it stands currently. Campbell?
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. So what you see here is we're currently working on drafts of the taxonomy. This is not what the final one is going to look like, but I just want to give you a rough idea of how you can look at this thing. So in the first section here, we have the terms, listing of all terms. This basically lists out every concept that's been defined as part of the orange button taxonomy. There's approximately 1,600 terms. And one of the things I think would be important when people start to look at this is to look at predominantly the name and the documentation associated with an individual item. So if you just want to click on one of those, Chris, that would be great. And so then basically looking at the label, what's the documentation for it. The other thing that may be worth looking at is also looking at the data type for them, just to make sure that it makes sense. For string items, not so much, but it's really more some of the performance metrics where if we're looking at DC output of a device or maximum capacity. We've pretty much we have defined a number of types for this taxonomy, things like power, and energy item types, irradiance item types. So it'd be worthwhile looking at those, making sure that they are appropriate for individual items. Today, the taxonomy is currently, you see these listings of terms, but there will be some additional groups there representing the build, evaluation, and ongoing operations, similar to the structure that Tom laid out earlier. But then in addition, there'll be all the details of individual contracts will also be laid out. All of those terms are included in the listing of terms, but when you come back, if you come back in July and look at this, we're actually we'll be updating this on an ongoing basis over the next month. You'll see details of individual contract types, be it a power purchase agreement or a construction agreement or an environmental assessment, the different types of reports that were identified as stage 1 of this project will start appearing in the taxonomy. At this point, however, we're pretty confident we've got a complete listing of the terms, and once again, if you want to see those, you can go to that section, listing of all terms. So Chris, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Campbell. That was very comprehensive. So that's what we've got in the top left panel. Moving on to the top right, we've already touched on it, but as Campbell stated, if you click on any concept in the tree on the left, you can see more details about that concept. So if I select plant ID, for example, I can see that the details pane is split into 4 main sections: labels, references, properties, and custom type information. The labels are reasonably self-explanatory and similar to what you may have seen before in US GAAP. You've got a standard label and a documentation label, which gives you a bit more information about what that concept is. There's a references section. So at present, this taxonomy doesn't contain any references, but in the future, there may well be references to SunSpec or IECRE here. The properties provide a little bit more granular details on exactly what you can expect a fact reported as plant ID to be. So as Campbell was stating, it's a string, it's for a duration, and so on and so forth. And then finally, custom type information, if there is any, which there isn't here, goes at the bottom. To just flick through the remaining 2 tabs at the top, relationships shows all calculation relationships that the concept is involved in, but the taxonomy doesn't contain any calculation relationships at the moment, so there's nothing to see here. And tree location shows every location within the taxonomy that this concept appears. So on the left, you can see it appears in listing of all terms towards the top of the presentation. The tree locations panel tells us it appears in the presentation 3 other places, so 4 places in total, and also in the definition. So it's useful for quickly finding out where this particular concept exists. So moving on towards the bottom, we have 2 tools, searching and commenting. So starting with searching, I can type in here whatever I like, and Yeti will go off and look through the solar taxonomy, through the orange button taxonomy, to find anything that's similar to what it is that we've searched for. So you see plant ID is the top one with 100% match, but it's got reasonable confidence for some other things because I've got the word ID in. There is a highlight matches button here as well that you can use to show all of the matches that were made in yellow, should you choose to do so. And it's worth me saying that by clicking on any of the matches here, the taxonomy, the 2 panels at the top update in concept, so you can quickly search through the taxonomy to find what it is that you're looking for. And finally, commenting. So if you're logged in as a registered user, as I am, to do that during the public review period, there will be a self-sign-up mechanism in place. But once you're logged in, just pull this down, you will see these green plus icons towards the right of the top right panel. These mean that you can add comments to relevant sections of the taxonomy. So if I want to make a general comment on the entire plant ID concept, I'd click this one. But if I wanted to make a comment on one of the various facets below that, I can do so by clicking on an icon that's next to that particular facet. By way of example, just for completeness, I'm going to comment on the documentation label. There's not a typographical error there, but just by way of example, so you can see what sort of comments you might add, I'm going to add one in. So quickly type that in. Typo in documentation label, there is a typo here. So giving myself a subject, hopefully give it a clear overview of what the issue is. So a bit more information is expected in general, but for the sake of the demo, I'll continue. So click add comment. Next to the plus button where I clicked it, there is a number indicating that there's now a comment, and the comments view has all of the information about the comment that I just made. So who made it, where I made it, exactly which component I commented on, and exactly when I made it as well. So this is really useful for taxonomy reviewers to be able to provide feedback to the taxonomy authors to be able to very quickly see the feedback that they've got, and indeed they can reply to it should they choose to. So by double clicking on any comment, you can see what it is, find more information about it, and press reply. So I'm just going to reply here, add comment. So an author might explain why the taxonomy is that way, or say, yes, there is an issue here, I'll get that fixed. And it's important to note that any comments that are not resolved when a new version of the taxonomy is uploaded will migrate forward to the next version. So there's no fear of you ever losing your comments. So it's an efficient way of providing feedback quickly and efficiently to the taxonomy authors. So that completes the overview in Yeti. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Chris, thanks very much. And Campbell, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And just bear with me a second. Oops, let's see, sorry. So that gives you a sense for, what the Orange Button program is and the status to date. We want to thank everybody for joining us, and we want to talk a little bit about, how to get involved, and why should you get involved. Getting involved means being able to incorporate your own process, your own data fields into the standards that we're developing today. We're working through a process, we're defining terms, and your input to those terms means that these are terms that you'll be able to use more readily and more easily adopt these standards. Getting involved also means an opportunity to leverage new business opportunities. So, and there are lots of ways of getting involved. First, I want to mention that there is an Intersolar conference taking place July 10th through 13th in San Francisco. You can go to that site right there and that URL and access it. There's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of presentations on Orange Button at that event. We also encourage you to review the taxonomy. We will be sending this out, making this link available so that you can actually look at Yeti and review the taxonomy in the tool and tell us what you think. Also join the working group. We have a working group that meets monthly. You can join it by emailing osdx@sunspec.org and we'll let you know how to do that. And then also, watch for the public review and comment period. It's coming up in late July, and we'll be sure to keep you informed. If you want to get in touch with us immediately, you can contact either Tom Tanzi or myself, and you can see our contact information there on the screen. And so I want to thank all of our speakers again for participating, and thank all of you for joining. Tom, did you have any remaining words that you wanted to say before we sign off?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Michelle. Just to reiterate that the Intersolar Finance Symposium will be held July 10th, that's Monday, in San Francisco at the Intercontinental Hotel, and the Intersolar Asset Management Summit will be held the following day on July 11th. The major theme of both conferences is Orange Button and data exchange. So we'll be covered by really effectively every speaker. And so we certainly encourage anybody that's interested in this topic to come to what is the West Coast's biggest finance conference for solar. And it's going to be really a great event. So we have Senator President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon from California providing a keynote. We also have Richard Kaufman, who's the Chairman of Energy and Finance for the state of New York. We have Mike Eckhart from the Citigroup, Global Head of Environmental Finance. We have John Previtali from Wells Fargo Bank that's on this call that will be there, and a list of another 40 speakers, lots of CEOs, lots of people that are interested in this topic. So I encourage you to come out, make connections, and get involved in Orange Button. Finally, on the 13th, 7:30 a.m., we'll be having an Orange Button networking meeting. And so anybody who's interested in getting involved to do data exchange, we are setting up an event to pair counterparties with each other. So if there's a company that you want to do a data exchange with, this is a good place to meet and greet with them. So we've signed up 34 companies so far that have agreed to come and meet with each other, but we have room for plenty more. So if you are in San Francisco at that time, please do come and join us.
Tom, thanks very much. And thanks everyone for joining us today. And, we will, watch your email because we'll be telling you about the public review and comment period coming up in late July. And we hope to see you at Intersolar. Thank you.